have changed. So now it's, I am knitting lady now, yes. No, we have changed. Now I'm knitting.
Yes.
So always one is knitting. Extra oxytocin for you. We love you, you know. Yes.
Okay, so you wanted to say something, no?
Yeah, I wanted to ask something. I often wondered about what is the child's experience in connection with birth when the mother is given epidural. I was thinking when her pathway is blocked and the production of beta endorphins.
So it's a big question.
I know, because in the other way I often have experienced that the children can be experienced doped 1 or 2 days after birth. Yeah.
So it's a big question because there are probably many kinds of effects. We already said some words about the probable effect on the quality and the duration of breastfeeding. We already mentioned that epidural anesthesia disturbs breastfeeding, but what was easy to evaluate is at which point one technique disturbs more than the other.
Yeah.
So in terms of effect on breastfeeding, it seems that was a study published in 2005. I didn't give you the reference. 2005 in Anesthesiology. It's a journal read by anesthesiologists, of course, and it's a study from Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. It's an American study from New York. So it seems that, and I think there is another study saying roughly the same. So that's one effect that has been to a certain extent demonstrated. Let's start with what has been demonstrated. There is another effect that apparently has been demonstrated, that an epidural anesthesia seems to have an effect on the process of rotation of baby's head. That's a study published in 2005 in Obstetrics and Gynecology, you know, the green journal. So to demonstrate that, they repeated ultrasound scans during labor. So apparently, one effect of epidural anesthesia is to disturb the process of rotation, a way to explain an increased number of operative delivery, and particularly, finally, cesarean section. What we can add...
Is that by epidural alone, or is it...
according to this study, it was mostly epidural anesthesia.
Okay, and no
Yes.
oxytocin infusion?
Yes, but you know, the main difficulties for all these studies, and that's a way to realize that all these issues are correlated, you know, when there is an epidural anesthesia.
Yeah.
Very often, after that, you need a drip of synthetic oxytocin. So how to finally to study what is the effect? People study the effect of epidural anesthesia and forget the drip of synthetic oxytocin, as if, or sometimes it's not mentioned. In fact, I have to look again at the American study about rotation. I will have to read the full text again, because it was 2005. Because they said the effect was on rotation, but I have to look again to see if they mention the effect or associated effect of epidural, you know, or the eliminated women epidural. I don't remember. It's difficult because people always forget to mention drip of synthetic oxytocin. That it's like that. It's a minor detail. We might wonder why is it considered a minor detail? You know? We go back to your question after that, but we can wonder. Perhaps one reason is that from a chemical perspective, synthetic oxytocin is the same as natural oxytocin. It's a simple molecule, a non-peptide. So perhaps it's a reason why people. I heard once a midwife saying to a woman a little bit reluctant, "You have a drip. You know, what is this drug?" She said, "It's not a drug. It's natural. It's oxytocin." But there are differences because it's not released in pulsation. You need high doses and so on. Another reason why it's considered a minor detail, it is that a drip of synthetic oxytocin, in general, is installed by the nurse or the midwife. While all the other obstetrical interventions are made by doctors. The epidural anesthesia is by doctors. Forceps is by doctors. Cesarean section is by doctors. So the only intervention, obstetrical intervention in childbirth, that is not routinely done by doctors is the drip of synthetic oxytocin. Perhaps this is the reason why it's considered a minor detail. We don't need to look at to consider. I don't know. So, but it's a reason for the difficulties we have to answer your question. Theoretically, we can anticipate that there are many effects because we know about the strong connections between the system of endorphins and the system of oxytocin. And when you use epidural anesthesia, you make useless the system of endorphins. You eliminate the system of endorphins. So probably it has an effect on the system of oxytocin. In fact, everybody knows in this room that in general, when there is epidural anesthesia, there will be very often also drip of synthetic oxytocin. In general, it goes together. So I don't want to give too many details, but it has been demonstrated that there are long links between these two systems. One way has been experimental among students during self-genital stimulation, which is a scientific word for masturbation, because I saw that you are looking at the ceiling. What does it mean? So I translated. I got it before. They looked at the effect on the level of oxytocin, and they found that if they inject naloxone, that is to say, an antagonist of opiates, it's impossible to reach the same level of oxytocin. So it's one experiment that comes to my mind, confirming the strong links between the system of endorphins and the system of oxytocin. So a way to suggest that probably there are many effects. Some of them are almost obvious. In general, epidural anesthesia means also drip of synthetic oxytocin in general. But difficult to demonstrate all these effects because difficult to have randomized controlled trials. Everybody knows about a randomized controlled trial. Principle. Do I need to recall what it is? No? 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 Do the French midwife know what is a randomized controlled trial? Not sure. Perhaps I explain for some of you. Even if you have a very small interest in medical research, you need to know what is a randomized controlled trial. Randomized. It's supposed to be the only valuable method to evaluate the ratio of benefits to risk of any attitude. It can be anything. It is used for almost everything. For example, the presence of a doula has been evaluated by randomized controlled trials. You know, it can be used for drugs, it's used for surgical operation, it's used for obstetrical procedures. So the principle is simple. You decide to study a population. But the first step before anything else is to draw lots, to do a lottery. You randomize. So you have two groups at random, lottery, at random. One group, you have an attitude, the other group, you have another attitude, another treatment, or nothing, or placebo, and so on. And then you can follow up the two groups. And theoretically, there is no limit in time. So this is considered as the only valuable method to evaluate the ratio of benefits to risk of whatever we are doing. So, but you understand the limits of this ideal method. We mentioned several of these limits, so particularly in the period of birth, it's not always feasible. You cannot ask, to go back to your question, we cannot ask 1,000 women at random to give birth with an epidural anesthesia and 1,000 women at random, after doing not, to give birth without epidural. You are not, it's not feasible. So that's why often for such questions we have to reply much more with theoretical consideration. Occasionally, randomized control trial. I give an example. It's possible to compare two techniques of C-section. Randomized, that's acceptable. So, I want to go back to the interest of our database, because people use different protocols to study the same pathological condition. And often the main data we have at our disposal are in terms of timing. What is the critical period for gene-environment interaction? So, and that's often a very important question, when it happened, you know. In the past, when I say in the past, it means 4 years ago. In the past, when people were studying the origin of a disease.
Of what? Disease?
Or a disease, or the origin of a personality trait. They were always limited to two questions. Geneticists wanted to identify the genes involved, and others were trying to estimate, to evaluate what was the comparative role of genetic factors and environmental factors. What is the part of genetic factors? What is the part of environmental factors? So people were discussing, you know, for example, for autism, some of them were saying 90% genetic, others 70% genetic, and that was the question. Today there is a very important question from a practical perspective. In terms of timing, when was the critical period for gene-environment interaction? When? And often the only precise answers we can provide to many questions is timing, when. It happened at that time. It's always easy to say what has been the main factor, particularly where birth is concerned, because so many things, and because researchers don't have always the same data at their disposal. Some of them have the data about labor inductions. Others don't have that. But have other data. For example, I don't know, epidural. So it's very difficult. But when you bring all these things together, you have some ideas about the timing. When was the critical period? So it's a way to explain that your question is difficult. Well, because epidural anesthesia is rarely an isolated intervention. So, yes, I saw your hand for a long time.
Yes, so I have a question about the physiology that you talked about this morning. So you said that when Pitocin is used, that the maternal levels of oxytocin rise. Then, is that what you said? Am I correct?
Yes, yes. I clarify something, because we're in Europe, and many people don't know what is Pitocin.
Oh, it's a synthetic
Pitocin
oxytocin.
is American trademark for
Yes.
for synthetic oxytocin, is the equivalent of syntocinon in Western Europe. So that I clarify that because I look at the face of somebody.
Thank you. And then you said that you're worried that with the use of the synthetic oxytocin, that our own production of oxytocin will decrease. So I'm confused at if you're giving an infusion of oxytocin, but our bodies are responding by increasing the production of oxytocin, then how will that evolutionarily change?
No, increase, decrease.
No, you said earlier that
It goes into the blood, so the blood level
When
rises,
you,
but it's not your own
what I
production.
explained, I'll repeat what we explained and what has to be understood. It's good to clarify. Are you a teacher?
No, sorry,
No.
midwife.
How? Because you have you would have a beautiful voice.
Oh, thank you.
What we said this morning, and it can be completed by some other information, when you use a drip of synthetic oxytocin, the maternal level, maternal concentration in oxytocin in the bloodstream is comparatively very high. You need high doses to be effective compared with the amount of oxytocin naturally released by the posterior pituitary gland.
So you're saying the synthetic version of oxytocin?
So you have to introduce a lot of oxytocin. So the maternal concentration is very high. Therefore, other questions, does it reach? And something we have to add to what we said, it is that when you introduce synthetic oxytocin intravenously, it does not reach the brain receptors to oxytocin. It does not go across the blood-brain barrier. That's why when you inject synthetic oxytocin, you can only observe mechanical effect, peripheral. When you introduce oxytocin IV, you cannot observe behavioral effect.
Yes.
It does not cross the blood-brain barrier. Only peripheral mechanical effect. So that's a big difference between both because of the blood-brain barrier. And you know, when you consider the natural oxytocin secreted by the hypothalamus, this oxytocin is also reaching the neurons of the brain. So you have behavioral effect. I open a parenthesis to say there is only one way to introduce in the human body oxytocin in order to have behavioral effect is nasal sprays. It's the only way, not intravenously. No. So that's why it took so long to discover the behavioral effect of oxytocin. Because as long as people were studying injecting IV, there was no obvious behavioral effect, only mechanical effect. So the other thing to consider, to go back to your question, it is that when you introduce high doses of oxytocin, in fact, you reduce the production of the natural oxytocin, a kind of feedback mechanism. It's a general rule in endocrinology. When you introduce artificially a hormone, the body stops producing this hormone. Women who use estrogens for contraception don't release their natural estrogen. People who take corticosteroids as a drug don't stop releasing the release of such corticosteroids by their adrenal gland, and so on. So it's important to understand that when oxytocin is released intravenously, it's blocked the release of the natural hormone, and it has no behavioral effect. It's replacing the love hormone. Yes, that's what we say. To clarify, you wanted to say something?
I wanted to say it's not only on hormonal level, it's everything. It's doing with antibiotics the same way, and the vitamins that we take. If we take the same synthetic vitamins, our body stuff produce the same vitamins from inside naturally. Same like iron and stuff like that.
Always balancers, yes.
But always. Synthetic always kills the natural process.
Yes,
that's why since you go on track your natural way, it's not working anymore.
General rule. It's important to understand. In fact, it's what the basis of what we said this morning. We are making love hormone useless. We replace love hormone.
So along the same lines with the hormones, with adrenaline, you said in labor, if adrenaline is introduced, then oxytocin is decreased or negated. So my question then, if we're giving the oxytocin through the IV, does adrenaline still have the same effect on the mother? Is it negating the pitocin or the artificial infusion of oxytocin, therefore requiring more and more and more?
It's not the same, because in this case, when you give oxytocin IV, finally the woman in labor is less dependent on environmental factors because she has not to release her own oxytocin. So she's the labor is not influenced in the same way by situations such as being cold, being scared, or even the effect of language or light, because anyway she's not giving birth by herself. She's giving birth when the usual association oxytocin epidural means replacing natural oxytocin and endorphin. So the woman is not giving birth by herself. She's less. She can. Woman with epidural and synthetic oxytocin can watch the television during labor.
Sleep.
They are on our planet. They remain on our planet. So it's another world. It's completely different. That's why what you said it made me think of something interesting. That there is a kind of health professional that are not ready to reconsider the routine participation of the baby's father. The doctrine of the participation of baby's father. They are the obstetrical anesthesiologists. One of the most difficult public I have met regarding this particular question, participation of baby's father at birth, was the public of obstetrical anesthesiologists. I was invited to speak at the annual conference of obstetrical anesthesiologists, and none of them were ready to reconsider the doctrine. Interesting. This morning, when we talk about that, most of you midwives understand that it's not simple. There are reasons to reconsider the doctrine. Midwives understand that easily. Specialized obstetrical anesthesiologists who only know about women with an epidural anesthesia and a drip of synthetic oxytocin couldn't have difficult to understand why we should reconsider the doctrine. It's interesting because originally the doctrine was introduced by the natural childbirth movement. Originally, it came from the public, from the natural childbirth group. We wanted to, baby's father to be there, strong link inside the couple, links between the baby and the so and so on. It started like that, you know, from the natural childbirth. And now it has been easily accepted by the most conventional department of obstetrics in many countries. And now it's the opposite. Those who are not ready at all to reconsider the doctrines are experts in epidural anesthesia and drip of synthetic oxygen. That's something to realize. I'm thinking that there is something we didn't say this morning, but which, in a sense, is important about cultural conditioning, about theories which have been at the root of this doctrine. It's something I realize when occasionally I'm still involved in home birth. It's almost always the same situation. It's a case of a doula that I've known for a long time, was a huge experience as a doula, 13 years of intense experience. She had 4 children by herself, including 3 born at home with me in the past. And it happened that she knows that I am in London, and she's given me a call saying, if you could come, your presence in the house would make the birth legal. Registered at the British Medical Council, we will not be obliged to go to a hospital or to call anonymous midwives sent by the NHS, the National Health Service, you know, so and you never know who will come, who will not come. So it's, in general, it's in this situation I still go to some home birth. In general, I stay in the kitchen. I don't go beyond the kitchen. I make the husband busy. Easy to make a man busy at home. Just a little bit of imagination. I leave the 2 women together in another part of the house. This doula has an incredible capacity to keep her mouth closed and to know what's happening and to keep a low profile, perceived as a mother figure, you know, she's a grandmother now, whatever. I'm constantly amazed by how easy a birth can be in such a situation. But what I find interesting is what happens when you introduce baby's father after the birth of the baby and the delivery of the placenta. You introduce the father, almost always the reaction is, I'm so proud of you. It's admiration, mystery at the same time, perhaps reinforced love for his wife. It makes me think of the time when they were goddesses, you know, that, and you understand that in this case, the attachment for the baby will be much more indirectly via a reinforced attachment of the man for his wife, perhaps a reinforced love or admiration for his wife. It will be completely different from the theories we heard in the 70s. In the 70s, the theory was to talk about bonding between father and newborn baby. Bonding that will be symmetrical or similar to the bonding between mother and newborn baby. It cannot be the same. Just after birth, it's a critical period for mother and baby, who are in a special hormonal balance. It's critical for them. It's not the same for the baby's father, who is not in the same hormonal balance. So this theory of the bonding between father and baby, you know, was not based on a good understanding of the physiological process. It was an idea. It was sort of direct bonding between father and baby. And in the situation I described, it's obviously very different. Is much more attached. Probably we can anticipate a gradual attachment of the man for the child via the reinforced love for his wife, you know, indirect. We must say that something to do, or that has been observed in many species of primates, particularly chimpanzees. You know. The male chimpanzees only protect the children of females with whom they had sexual relationship. They only protect these children. So perhaps it's a way to go back to the world of chimpanzees. That's perhaps a little too much, but it's a command, by the way. What do you want to say?
Just to clarify, when you say the natural oxytocin passes to the brain and the other doesn't, does that also mean that obviously then women who are on the drip, they have less normal oxytocin level in their brain? Wouldn't that mean that they have a higher incidence of postnatal depression? Is there any research on that? Or
what are the links between the way a woman is giving birth and the risk of postpartum depression? Theoretically, we should expect that there is a link for many reasons. Obviously, the hormonal balance of a woman who has given birth by herself is not the same as the hormonal balance of a woman who has not given birth, who had a C-section or so apparently. Many theoretical reasons to think that it should be a risk factor. Also, we know that oxytocin is an antidepressant. So, not to have released oxytocin for the birth of the baby, after that for the delivery of the placenta, and also for milk ejection reflex, after that, apparently might be a risk factor. So this is theoretical. In reality, it's incredibly difficult to prove at the point to demonstrate for the reason we have given. We cannot do randomized controlled trial. That's the difficulty. However, it's highly plausible that when a woman has not given birth by herself, is more at risk than having postpartum depression than the one who has given birth with her own hormones. It's highly plausible. I must say that since the end of my hospital career, when I only have the experience of home birth, I always forget to introduce the topic of postpartum depression. Why? Because I don't remember one case of postpartum depression among women who gave birth at home without any drug, without any interference.
I know those cases.
Yes, there are, but without any drug, without any interference, it's not common. You know one case. But when you think that in the modern statistic in hospitals, it's often something like 15%, 20%. It's a big difference, you know. It shows that there are many other factors. Some of them have been demonstrated. Of course, a woman who was already depressed before is more at risk. But the one who is depressed perhaps also more at risk to have a difficult birth. Difficult to... So, there are many other factors. For example, it seems that a woman has a very high level of progesterone during pregnancy and a spectacular drop of her level of progesterone at birth, she's more at risk. There have been certain people studying that, you know. There are other factors, but it's highly probable that it's something important to consider. It's something important a way to explain why it's so common today. You know, when I looked at the official statistics of postpartum depression, I'm surprised. You know, when we, of course, we have also to consider that the definition is not always precise. All people don't use exactly the same criteria. You know, so you have not to confuse the blues. You know, the what I call the syndrome of the third day. You know, the lady, the woman who on the third day think everything is difficult, crying a little bit, but on the fourth day everything is okay. That's not postpartum depression.
They're cleansing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have not to confuse the blues and the real postpartum depression. But many statistics evaluate the real postpartum depression at 15% something, particularly in conventional hospitals. So it's highly probable, but very difficult to demonstrate at the present time. Scientific method at our disposal, impossible to do randomized controlled trials.
Yeah, I'm just shocked because I think we as midwives always look for a reason how to persuade women to go like the natural way, or to look out for reasons to make them clear that it's not just like one intervention, but like we have then the whole cascade of interventions which will follow. And I think it's really weird that those kind of things are not written down properly in textbook, and we don't argue with those kind of arguments, even though they're so obvious, they make so much sense, and yeah, I don't know what to say.
Yes, yes. You know, there is a group of women I know who are absolutely convinced of that. There are the doulas I know in London. I told you I've done information session for doulas in London since 1998. So, and for all those I know, it's absolutely obvious, you know, that a highly medicalized birth is a risk factor. Taking into account that a home birth can also be disturbed. It was easy to disturb a home birth as well, you know. So we have to take that into account, but for those I know that it's almost obvious how to prove it. That. Yes? So postpartum depression in Turkey, no?
Oh. We have a lot.
A lot, yeah, yes.
Our target as an academy, as a team now, is having births without regrets. It's something a bit different. But
having births
without regrets. The problem now among women in Turkey is they have births with regrets all the time, even with planned cesarean, epidural cesarean, or normal pushed birth. They all have regrets after the birth. I should have done this. I should have done this.
So regretting something.
Yes. So our aim, our target is whatever the birth is, a birth without regret. Then that stops the depression. So we want them to have the autonomy to decide and to be critical in the team.
Yes.
But my question will be, we talked about natural oxytocin and endorphin and things, and hormonal orchestration and cocktail. How does the baby contribute to this? Does the baby secrete its own hormonal orchestration, or only takes it from the mother to the...
Yes. First, the definition of, you know, birth without regret, birth without... I think it's always good to have a positive definition, because we always had birth without something. Birth without pain, birth without fear, birth without violence, birth without this, birth without that, birth without regret. Perhaps we have to talk about birth with something positive. And why not classifying the birth in two groups? birth with or without love hormones.
Yes.
You know, even when you look at the objectives of many groups, it can be epidemiological, public health organization, general public, and so on. When they look at the objective, it's always a negative objective. How to reduce the rate of cesarean section. But that can be a dangerous objective if it's a primary objective. If your primary objective is to reduce the rate of cesarean section, a negative objective, it can be dangerous. Something we can already observe in a city like London, where the guidelines expressed by NICE. NICE is the National Institute of Clinical Excellence. The guideline is you should reduce your rate of C-section, of cesarean section. What is the effect, the primary effect? More long, difficult birth by the vaginal route. There are in London, I heard some stories of medical teams, they do all what they can to control the rate of C-section, to all what they can to have the baby born by the vaginal route for their statistics.
Torture the baby to not have a C-section.
That's dangerous. That's dangerous as a primary objective. It should not be a primary objective. It should be a lower rate of C-section and other intervention should be a secondary effect of a better understanding of birth physiology. The first thing to do is to understand the basic need of laboring women. What we have done this morning, the rate of cesarean will follow. But I wrote that in Lancet, you know, in a very serious medical journal. So, but the primary objective it can be dangerous, and that's a negative objective. That's why I will suggest that instead of classifying the birth the usual way, vaginal route or abdominal route, finally, it might be better, more useful, more appropriate to classify the birth first in two main big groups, birth with or without love hormones, in a positive way. The objective at the level of the planet might be that as many women as possible can give birth to the baby and to the placenta, let's not forget that, thanks to the release of love hormone. That's a way to express objective in a positive way. So that's the first part of what you said. The second part, what was the second part?
Contribution of the baby.
Yes. So the second part, it shows that baby is active during labor. First, baby is active to participate in the initiation of labor. That's a general rule among all mammals. Not the same mechanism, exactly the same mechanism among all the species of mammals, but it's a general rule that the fetus participate in initiation of labor. Among humans, it seems that one of the main mechanisms is baby sending messages saying, my lungs are mature, I'm ready to breathe, I'm ready to be born. So the mature lungs are releasing in the amniotic fluid a factor which can stimulate the release of prostaglandin E2. And prostaglandin E2 is important in the initiation of labor. It's one of the mechanisms, probably others, maturation of the hypothalamus-pituitary axis and so on. We have not the time for the details at 4:45, but the general rule, the baby is active, participating in the initiation of labor. Important to know that. It means that whatever the method of labor induction you use, you always precede the messages sent by the fetus, by the baby. Whatever the method of induction, even those that are called natural, are not natural. If a method of labor induction is effective, it's not natural. It's a way to precede the signal given by the baby. Baby has not given, he said, I am ready. So important to say. And after that, during labor, the baby is also active. We know that the fetus is releasing its own endorphins. It's autonomous to release its own, to protect itself. The baby is releasing its own catecholamines. In the case of the baby, it's mostly noradrenaline. Noradrenaline, that can give a last touch to the maturation of the lungs, important before being born. No, so it's active, which probably has many roles as well. For example, I'll just give example because it's late. One effect of the noradrenaline released by the fetus, that baby in physiological conditions is born with big pupils, big eyes. That effect of noradrenaline. That's a kind of noradrenaline. It's a member of the adrenaline family. Not it's not exactly adrenaline, it's a member of the family called catecholamines. It's the detail, technical detail. So baby is born with large pupils, big eyes. It seems to be a signal given by the mother, look at my eyes. And it seems that the eye-to-eye contact is an important time at the beginning of the mother-baby relationship among humans. It's an interaction. So these are just some examples among many others. We can have not the time to talk about all these hormones, but it means, yes, baby is active, is participating, is active.
And secreting oxytocin too?
Pardon?
And secreting oxytocin too?
So we know that human beings can start releasing oxytocin, training themselves to release more love hormones very early in life. Probably it's a small aspect of how baby can participate in this session of labor. But we know that as early as 19 weeks of fetal life, we know that from ultrasound scan, when a baby boy is sucking its thumb, the baby boy can have an erection. Erection means, for sure, release of oxytocin. So we know that human beings can start training themselves to release their love hormone in the middle of fetal life, not ultrasound scan. So babies are active, yes, in general, babies are active. So I think it's now late. We have to prepare a conclusion, prepare the end of the day. I can see from when looking at you that many of you now have a low level of adrenaline. you are quiet. Your neocortex is not highly stimulated by catecholamines. So perhaps it's a way to conclude what we have been talking about. We have already reached several conclusions, many of them. You know, we have summarized why we are at the bottom of the abyss. We have been talking about how to participate in the initiation of necessary new awareness. Perhaps during some minutes, quickly, I'd like to answer a question which is often raised in the corridors. The people always ask important questions in the corridor, or in the restaurant, but has not been raised today here. We said previously that different ways, we have repeated that. We didn't give many details, we had not the time, but for thousands of years, in all societies we know about, they have transmitted from generation to generation beliefs and rituals, the effect of which have always been to amplify the difficulties of human birth, in many ways, different aspects of socialization of childbirth. We give examples, you know, the scar after or on. And the effect of which has always been to separate mother and newborn baby. We talk a lot about the first hour following birth. I told you why, because tomorrow we get heart. It will be our topic. But this is a phase of labor that has been routinely highly disturbed by all society. At such a point that the general rule has been to separate mother and newborn baby, to postpone the initiation of breastfeeding. If we say in a different way, it has always been to neutralize the maternal protective aggressive instinct. What is the maternal protective aggressive instinct? No need for definition. Just imagine what would happen if you tried to pick up the newborn baby of a mother gorilla who has just given birth. Imagine a mother gorilla just given birth who try to pick up her baby. She will try to kill you. Incredible energy. That maternal protective aggressive instinct that all societies for thousands of years have routinely neutralized with all these beliefs, you know, colostrum is harmful. I give another example. If you look at baby's eyes, the black spirit will enter baby's body, and many other rituals, which from Australia. You know, Aborigines of Australia, Alice Spring. I don't know if you are aware of that.
No, I don't work with them, but I am.
The ritual just after the birth was to enfume the baby, to put, what is the fume, enfume, what is the term? To make a fire, and make a fire, and they separate baby from the mother because baby need to be enfumed in a fume. It's a detail, you know. Forget the details because just to say, all societies have found excuses to separate mother and newborn baby. Yes.
Yeah, and in scientification of love, you mentioned that it has also to do with the warrior cultures that we all have lived in, how it has been a want and a need for humans to create.
The question, yes. So
the ability
what I want to introduce now. It's sure that there is a question that have not been raised by anthropologists. It's paradoxical. But how to explain that for thousands of years, all societies with beliefs and rituals have amplified the difficulties of childbirth, have made more necessary the presence of an agent of the cultural movement, have separated mother and newborn baby, have delayed the initiation of breastfeeding, have transmitted beliefs like colostrum is harmful. What is the advantage of saying the colostrum is harmful? If all these beliefs, all these rituals have been widespread for thousands of years on 5 continents, it means that they had an advantage. What are the advantages of saying, for example, baby should not be in the arms of the mother to be dangerous because the colostrum is harmful. Baby must be in the arms of somebody else. So let's rush to cut the cord. Why? It has been like that for thousands of years. That important question. We can today offer an answer to this question in a current, once more, thanks to modern sciences, particularly from the place, the renewed importance we give to the concept of critical period, and particularly critical period for the development of the capacity to love. We can offer an interpretation because we have to realize that all the societies we know about have something in common. Finally, all of them have basically the same strategies for survival. the basic strategy for survival of all societies we know about is to dominate nature, and for a human group to dominate another human group. It has been like that for thousands of years. A way to realize that successful societies, that is to say, the only one we can study, the other one have disappeared for a long time. Successful societies are those that have transmitted from generation to generation beliefs and rituals, the effect of which has been to develop the human potential for aggression. To develop the human potential for aggression has been an advantage as long as these were the basic strategy for survival. How to develop the human potential for aggression? Modern sciences say, in a critical period surrounding birth, we need to develop the human potential for aggression to dominate nature. We need to moderate the respect for Mother Earth, the facet of love. We need to moderate the capacity to love, to dominate other human groups. It's an advantage to develop the capacity to destroy life. It was an advantage as long as these were the basic strategy for survival, dominating nature, dominating other human groups. It's what all societies have done. It has been an advantage. But the point is that today we are just starting to realize that there are limits to such strategies. We have learned recently that there are limits to the domination of nature. Until recently, there were conflicts between human groups. One group was trying to eliminate the other. We're at a time when we understand that what we have to do now is much more to create a sort of unity of the planetary village. Humanity must invent new strategy for survival. Until now, it was the survival of our human group. Now, we are reaching another level. It's survival of humanity, that I've been talking about. So that suddenly we realize that if we have to invent new strategy for survival at the level of humanity, what we need now is much more the energy of love, respect for Mother Earth, planetary village. We need now the energy of love. That suddenly all these beliefs, all these rituals are losing their evolutionary advantages. It means how important it is to try, thanks to modern sciences, to rediscover the basic need of laboring women and the basic need of newborn babies. What I said, how important it is. We're at a turning point in the history of mankind, new strategy for survival in terms of humanity. I must say that this is, to a great extent, the reason for our conference in Honolulu. It's mostly the future, the future of humanity.
When is it exactly, the conference?
In fact, I must, a way to conclude, to say that in general, now, because now it's almost 5 o'clock, in general, after being together like that during a whole day, we have to separate. We are sad. We cry. It would be normal to cry after being together like that. But today we shall not cry. On the contrary, we can separate in a joyful way, since we know that we'll meet again. At the Mid-Pacific Conference, so I suggest that instead of crying, we separate by singing together. So that we sing together. And of course, we have to find a tune that everybody knows, so we can sing together. And we can also find words what are appropriate to the situation.
Do we all have to get undressed? Or is it
No. Singing together, but it's I don't know why. So,
I only have 2 layers.
I suggest that we use the subtleties of French language. In French language, as you know, and perhaps others know as well, when we separate, but we are absolutely sure that we'll meet again, we say au revoir. Au revoir means exactly, we'll meet again. It's a way to separate by saying, we'll meet again. And yes, we'll meet again. But so, what I suggest that we might sing together now is ce n'est qu'un au revoir. It means it's only au revoir. You know, it's not bye-bye, you know, we'll meet again. Ce n'est qu'un au revoir. Mes frères. Mes frères means my sisters, my brothers, mes frères. Oui, nous nous reverrons. Oui, nous nous reverrons. We'll meet again. Nous nous reverrons. Ce n'est qu'un au revoir, mes frères. Oui, nous nous reverrons. On a tune that everybody knows. Ce n'est qu'un au revoir, mes frères. Ce n'est qu'un au revoir. Oui, nous nous reverrons, mes frères. Ce n'est qu'un au revoir. Ce n'est qu'un au revoir, mes frères. Ce n'est qu'un au revoir. Oui, nous nous reverrons, mes frères. Ce n'est qu'un au revoir. Once more. Ce n'est qu'un au revoir, mes frères. Ce n'est qu'un au revoir. Oui, nous nous reverrons, mes frères. Ce n'est qu'un au revoir.
Thank you very much.